And welcome back. And we're moving into our first conversation for today. And while we should be actually by the sea to be able to have it, so we can take the real appreciation. Fortunately, it's easier in the studios. We have with us on set Victor Show, who is the sports fishing coordinator for the Coastal Zone Management Authority Institute. And we have Kleon Coleman, who is an outreach assistant with Oceana, Belize. Good morning and welcome. So we are talking about the 20th anniversary of the Coastal Zone Management Authority and also the Marine Litter campaign that is being rolled out as well. We thank you for being here to have this conversation. And let's just start off by talking about CSMAI as an opening.
All right, good morning. Pleasure to be here. And like you said, we're here to highlight the 20th anniversary for Coastal Zone. We've been in operation in Belize for the past, 20 years. And this year we're taking time out to just take a step back and reflect on all that we have been doing in Belize, and then try to use a calendar of events to highlight different coastal issues to bring awareness to the public. Effectively, Coastal Zone is a coordinating and advising body that was instituted back in '98 to try to bring all these different players along the coast, all the agencies, NGOs, what have you, and try to help them work together to guide for the proper development of Belizean coast and also wise resource use. Since then, we've been working on a number of projects, and hopefully during this 20th anniversary we can highlight all our accomplishments and also the different trials and tribulations that, like any organization, we faced to get here.
There's been quite a bit of restructuring in the work that you do as well. You coordinate very closely with the fisheries department, and you also work with many NGOs in being able to roll out some of the projects that you talk about. Tell us how the organization has evolved over the 20 years, but what it was first set out to do and what it is now doing.
So from what I know, Coastal Zone, we started out as a unit under the Fisheries Department, which later on, through a grant from the UNDP, we then involved into our own standalone authority and institute, and then we were mandated to, like I said, basically do the coordination advising so that we could have organization that would look at the different activities that are occurring along the coast and try to advise the key players on how we could improve or how we could work better together to improve the management of these resources. And over time, we have evolved into maybe having more to do with advising, because through our integrated coastal zone management plan, which we passed back in 2016, that was basically the culmination of our work over the past maybe 10, 13 years, was to develop this plan that would set out a roadmap or guidelines to development of the coast. So if you would have areas that maybe you would have riparian forests, that would be the mangrove. So you have the Forest Department interest there. If it's the, then you have the mangrove or habitats as well. You have to deal with DOE. If there's stand for dredging, you have to deal with mining and what have you. And so all these organizations would have interest in one location. The Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan would then provide guidelines on how these different organizations can work together, and then we feed off their same regulations or the legislation under their founding act. So we are not bringing something new to the table, but rather we're just highlighting what the legislation said and then how we could use this existing legislation to guide this development. The Integrated Coastal Zone Management Plan was accepted by Cabinet in 2016. So here we are in the rolling out phase. Now, more to what we're trying to do here with Oceana is, like you said, we work with NGO communities. So this is one of the projects that we're working on, is the Marine Litter campaign. And I don't know if you guys know, but the Marine Litter seems to be the buzzword for this year. It's the theme for the World Oceans Day. It's a part of the theme for Earth Day. It's really what has taken, from a global point of view, what have taken priority for this year is everyone trying to attack this marine litter problem because of the threat it has to the fishery stock on our worldview, but also to the different threats it poses to our health, to the tourism industry and whatnot in Belize as well.
Now, I want to get to the Marine Litter campaign. I think it's important, but let's just take the time to look at some of the highlights of your achievements as well. There are things like and I know they're done closely with other organizations like Oceana. Manage Access, for example, is one. the development plan that was passed in 2016 was very comprehensive in being able to ensure that whatever takes place along our coastline, I mean, that's what coastal management, is done in a manner that is more controlled, not kind of ad hoc like how we typically see development. Talk to us about some of the achievements and priorities that you have in the plan itself.
Right, so, and I should correct you there, the managed access wasn't part of one of coastal zone major achievement, that was fishes and whatnot. But yeah, so within the plan, one of our biggest achievement was development guidelines. We all know about different developments that are occurring across the country, and in the past that some people frown upon, or some people might think, what happened? Like there was clearly an oversight somewhere, or maybe there wasn't enough attention put on one key area. So what the regulations do is they have 9 planning regions within our integrated coastal zone management plan. Each planning region now has a separate guideline given the different political, socio-economical, and even geological traits of that area. So then we provide guidelines on how high structures should be, how big or how how sparsely placed or how closely placed different structures can be, such as residential areas, industrial, commercial areas. And we also provide guidelines on what type of material could be used to build these structures, because note on the keys, they're more exposed to harsher environments in terms of the first ones that would be affected by hurricanes, wave action, whatnot, versus more on the inland protected coast. We also provide guidelines on areas that should not be developed, highlighting key habitats that Belize fisheries resources depend on, key habitats that feed our marine protected species, such as the turtles and whatnot. So we also have guidelines that say, okay, you could develop this area to maybe 20 houses per acres. Well, this area, maybe you could put resorts and thing there, whatnot there, because it wouldn't pose a big threat to the environment around it. On the other hand, we do have regulations that say that area over there, that maybe 100 acres of mangrove should not be developed because of the coastal protection it provides to Belize.
How does this actually work, though? In terms of, do all of the key players, as you call them, do all of them sit at a meeting and they coordinate, one? And two, coastal zone management is almost just like a networking. You guys are the shadow, if I'm right, because you guys, in and of yourself, have no power to deal with. If, for example, a regulation is breached, you go under for forest, for mangroves, you have to then go to, I think the appropriate entity is forestry.
Yes, so you're right. We're more like a shadow, and so we're the shadow that has to keep everyone in check, honestly. Because, like you said, so the plan, before it was passed, we got all these key players, and that's why it took so many years to get all these key players around our table and say, okay, guys, this is what the legislation said from the Forest Department, Fishes Department, from the Mine Department and whatnot. So we had all these legislation, right? Back in the day, it would have been ad hoc. So we had all these guys sit down and say, okay, this is all your legislation, this is the area that all your legislation impacts, and this is our recommendation on how we could move forward in developing this while taking into account all of your different mandates and also the best interests of the coast. So like you could probably imagine this was a long drawn out process to get there. You know, when you said that coastal zone might not have that enforcement unit or that mandate, that's why we use the pre-existing legislation. So if there is someone that's doing illegal mangrove clearing, sure, that isn't illegal under Coastal Zone Act, because we don't speak of mangrove, but that is illegal under the Forestry Act, and it's under that legislation that we would then direct that complaint, or if we do get a complaint, for them to address. And all these departments know about what is within the plan because they were key components of developing this plan.
And the Forestry Department does nothing about something like that? You still have no power to tell them?
So very few times I've actually encountered the Forest Department doesn't know about it. It's that when these complaints are filed, sometimes they're not filed to the right person, or sometimes it's just that maybe within the community they know about this, but there wasn't any reach out to these different places. Because the Forest Department, and this is why the plan is so key, is that the Forest Department headquarters is in Belmopan. So if something is illegal mangrove clearing is happening down maybe off some key, right? The probability of a forest officer knowing about this clearing is very low unless we create these right channels so that we could funnel the information to the right person. And that was one of the objectives of the plan as well, is to try to create these communication channels.
And what if I'm an average citizen, though? How do I know if it's an approved development or if it's illegal mangrove clearing or putting a structure in a coastal area?
The thing is with the coastal zone management plan, it wasn't a plan that came about back from coastal zone. Yeah. Coastal zone was the one who spearheaded the initiative, but what they did, they went out to the public, to the people in these areas that are affected, and find out what were some of the reasons that some of the issues are happening in the community. And they came back and they used the different scientists, different science put together with different information, and that's how the integrated coastal zone management plan came about. So it wasn't something that coastal zone said, okay, this is what you need to do in your community to keep your community from beach erosion and different things. No, they went out and talked to the people to find out, you know, the issues.
Can I ask a personal question in terms of a personal pet peeve of mine? Back to the mangrove again. We keep on talking about mangrove, and from everything I've heard, mangroves are hugely important for fisheries, for coastline maintenance, to
block erosion, yeah.
To block erosion. But in Belize City, enforcement of it is a failure. You agree with that? And what is being done to avoid more desolation of the of the mangrove population? And is there anything being done to replace the mangrove population and what it does for fisheries population?
All right, so the mangrove issue is something that hits home with everyone. I agree too, and sure, the loss of mangrove on the level that we're seeing right now is a huge shame. But what is being done, I do know about a couple reforesting projects being done, and this is completely by some individuals or some NGOs on their own. On a national level, what I could say is I believe the Forest Department was working on a mangrove policy, but I can't comment on that. And from what we could see within our plan is that we've designated certain areas as it shouldn't be cleared. Last week, I believe there was a complaint about illegal mangrove clearing occurring along Hallover Bridge. And when we heard about this, like I said, we then communicated the information across the Forest Department.
Also as well, Coastal Zone also has their coastal advisory committees, and these are the individuals in the communities who are like, we call them like Coastal Zone call them like the police or the watchdogs of the community.
So they monitor?
They monitor, and whatever complaints they have, they forward it to Coastal Zone.
So the fundamental issue here is really, I think, about what your purpose is. To educate people why the coast and protecting the coast in particular ways is important. The mangroves, for example. We love beachfront properties. We love going to a resort, a hotel, or a home and seeing the beach. That'll be blocked by mangroves. And I think that it is having people understand why we need to keep mangroves, why we need to protect our coastlines. Talk to us about that as a part of your education process.
All right, so like you said, Coastal Zone, we do engage in education and outreach. We do attend a number of education outreach activities across the country, this being one of them. And to try to, like you said, bring highlight to what are the importance of these coastal communities and also the coastal habitats within these communities. The mangrove is not exactly the prettiest of habitats. If you see it up close from the aerial pictures, it looks fine. But if people want beachfront property, it's a kind of a fight. If someone already buys a section of land, how can you tell a person how to build on their land? Now, we could say that removing the mangrove would cause erosion, you would eventually lose that whole plot of land. But then some guys don't see the trade-off. So it's us going out there and saying, okay, guys, this is how much coastline Belize has. This is how much of these key habitats, seagrass included, and corals, because they also play their role, needs to be protected or needs to not be disturbed in order to keep this coastline being beautiful.
But don't we already tell people how not to build? For example, if I were to build a house right now, I can't build within a certain distance of my fence line. And I think that mangrove mangrove clearances are actually designated by law. There's a certain amount of mangrove by law that you can't remove. So we are telling them they can't do it by law.
Yes, if you know the law. And that's one of the things that's for educational reach. If see, you know the law, so you could tell me, okay, I read the law, Victor, and maybe I can't bail within 6 foot of my fence, or I can't remove maybe 30% of mangrove. But how about someone that doesn't know the law?
Then have the police.
After they finish cutting it,
Then there's
so that's why the education reach is very
also
important.
Oceana plays a huge role with mangroves as well, because as you know, we do a lot of cleanups in the communities. And we know that mangrove harbor a lot of mosquitoes, so we don't want to compound the mosquitoes with a lot of garbage. So we go out as best as possible and try to clean all these areas.
Now, and like I said, I think the education process is one that we have to be engaged in as well. We have a responsibility, and obviously you can be able to provide that as well. Let's shift over to the marine litter conversation, because that is also important. And when you spoke about the mangrove and the garbage, we have some great pictures up now. That's really where you see it shows what the mangroves do. They collect whatever is in the water, whether it's sand or garbage in this case.
But it's also sad because it's a habitat for marine life as well.
So talk to us about what we see in Belize when it comes to marine litter.
Okay, so we all know that marine litter and pollution is a huge problem globally. So when Coastal Zone came to us and asked for asked Oceana to join them with this marine litter campaign, it's not a huge problem for us because we already go out and clean areas, and it's also the theme for this year for the World Oceans Day. So on Oceana's part, we are very happy to go out and help Coastal Zone with the collection of these microplastics. Those are the bigger plastics, and they allow schools. So we're going to visit different schools to give presentation on the effects of marine litter, because we realize that a lot of secondary and primary school don't have a lot of education on the effects of marine litter, and like Victor said, it affects our tourism sector and the marine sector as well. So we feel it's important not only to go out and collect the plastics, but also to educate the students about the effects of marine litter.
Now, is it just, I mean, we have a garbage problem.
Exactly.
People don't like to put garbage where garbage should be. And my question is, when you do your collection, how much of it is garbage that you suspect people have intentionally thrown into the water, or perhaps just filtered out through a regular waterways?
All right, so with the what we're trying to do this year is that we've always have beach cleanup in Belize. Right, every year I think the Scouts lead the initiative that we have a national beach cleanup and whatnot. But what we don't have is data. I mean, like standardized data. So that's one of the goals in this education reach campaign, is to try to collect standardized data and say, okay, we know we have garbage in Belize, but how much do we really have maybe per square meter, right? So what we're teaching the secondary level schools is how to do macro litter sampling, sampling macro litter within by a set methodology, so that you could then infer how much item per meter square you'd have on your beach. And this would then allow us to compare to other Caribbean countries and even on a global level, because such a study has been done in many different countries, including Caribbean countries, but there wasn't any published data on Belize. So that's one of the data gaps we hope to fill through this. And like Mr. Coleman said, we also want to bring in the schools, because in educating both primary and secondary schools, you start to help build the next generation to reduce that litter problem. They also work as watchdogs within their house. I mean, kids will tell their parents, kids are honest, right? They will tell their parents, later, dad or mom, you shouldn't do that, right? Teachers said, or the presenter said, this will go and this will end up in the oceans, and eventually it will hurt the fish. Right?
Ideally, which department or which entity would be, which governmental entity would be responsible, rather than the high schoolers who can assist? But which government department, is that the Ministry of Environment who would be responsible for doing such a survey?
All right, so we've this year we've taken it upon ourselves to do it, but later on this year we also plan to work with, will Coastal Zone with Oceana and WWF have taken upon ourselves to do it this year in recognition of World Oceans Day. But like you said later on, if we want to keep it going in perpetuality, we'd also want to bring in the Solid Waste Management Authority and DOE as well on the conversation to see if we could get some type of set methodology for Belize, and also see what we could use this data to help do.
But anecdotally, do we know where the garbage is coming from? I mean, is it primarily garbage from Belize?
Well, I think that's what the data will show after the collection, to see where exactly, because we know we get flow from different countries, but we do not know exactly, because not a lot of data has been collected on marine litter. So maybe after the data collection have been concluded, then we will know exactly where some of the garbage are coming from. But Oceana is also putting together a curriculum to have this initiative be something yearly instead of just on World Oceans Day.
Yeah. You know, when I was speaking, you know, the way that we collect garbage and where it's coming from, but when I think about these island communities, I don't know if there's a better term for it, but these little islands where, for example, somebody's living by themselves, or you're looking at one of the larger populated islands like Kikok or San Pedro, you might have spillover from the waste collection system. Is that part of what is being factored in, campaigning to the municipal bodies to see how you can better control the spillover from garbage?
All right. So no, we are not touching on that yet. Like I said, this is just a pilot. But back to Marlene, when you said if anecdotal knowledge could give us an idea of where it's coming from, yes, but it depends on who you talk to and which part of the country you get the information from. If you would talk to guys maybe from PG, I don't know if you guys have been out to Hunting Key, but a lot of the garbage there has come from across the border, so it's a lot of coming in. However, if you talk to maybe someone from San Pedro, then they'd say on ship days, then they see more trash, and maybe they're trying to infer that's from the ship, or maybe it's just because of the increased activity on the island that they have more trash. If you talk to maybe someone from within a village or something, majority of that would be just from flooding would wash a whole lot of debris into the river, which would then carry out to sea. So it really depends who and from where you're speaking to, and that's why we need a standardized method just to try to gauge, okay, if we're on this beach and we find maybe 10 pieces of litter per meter square, we'll also do a biotic examination, meaning we'll check the litter to see if there's bite marks on it, to see if there's barnacles on it and whatnot, and that would tell us if it's land-based or sea-based. If it's from the sea, you find barnacles. But if it's land-based, it's either been dropped there by someone that came down the river and there wasn't chance for a barnacle to grow on it. So it's also what the trash can tell us, or the litter can tell us about its origins.
What are your hopes in terms of what this education will allow for?
All right, so hopefully with the students' learning methodology, it first of all,
because you have the cleanup every year.
Yes.
I know you usually mark off how much plastic and how many plastic bags and all the other stuff that you find.
All right, so with the methodology, because it hasn't been used in Belize, hopefully students being more cognizant of the methodology would be able to do such a sampling yearly, or even the schools could have such an initiative. Like I said, we'll tie in the different other governmental bodies later on. But what we hope to achieve is that we start to have a record every year of how much trash is on Belizean beaches, and if it fluctuates from here, if it's going down or not. And this would also help us with the government recently announced their move towards maybe working on minimizing the use of single-use plastic items. So this would also track on whether or not such an initiative is working, because obviously if you reduce plastics within the country, you would expect a reducing plastics on the beach. However, if you reduce it in country and it's not reduced on the beach, maybe the initiative isn't working, or maybe our problem isn't Belizeans, but it's a lot of the tidal action bringing a lot of litter from other countries in.
For me, I would say it's more of a country pride. For some reason, we do not like to throw garbage in a garbage pan. And maybe with this data, you can show, the large amount of plastic that will eventually end up in our marine environment and eventually affect the barrier reef. And some studies have shown that some of these same plastics end up in the food that we eat, the fish, because they ingest the plastic, and when we eat the fish and we ingest some of those same plastics which are harmful for us. So it's like a
thought I wanted to
yeah. So it's like a country pride.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, we've all seen the iconic image of the turtle that grew with the plastic. Around its shell. And we don't think, I mean, I think that's what we imagine when we think of garbage impacting marine life. But what are some of the other ways? We see, we know it can trap animals as well. Talk to us about some of the ways that this litter impacts the marine life.
Like I said, some of the plastics, they are made from different chemicals which affects the barrier reef. Some of the straws get stuck in like turtle nose, manatees. They mistake them for well, they don't have good vision, so they ingest when they're eating the seagrass or the turtle grass. They ingest some of these same plastics, which in turn lead to their death. So those are some of the harmful effects of these plastics.
Whenever I hear these campaigns, I'm always concerned. How do you get Belizeans who live in abundance and will tell you, I have 50,000 different problems and marine littering ain't one? How do you get them to see what we're talking about, the long-term effects of what's going on, when they're really thinking in the immediate? They're thinking, I'm going to go buy a fried chicken right now from Lychee, and that package, if it's too much for me, that's just out the window, even if I'm close to the coastline or I'm going to the Keys on what do you call it, the taxes, the water taxes. How do you get them to appreciate that my little one cover is going to affect the marine life in the same way that taking an entire bag is going to affect it?
All right, so that's a challenge, honestly. Like you said, everyone on a daily basis have many problems that sometimes litter just becomes the norm. But therein lies the problem in that what we're working to is we're trying to change the next generation. Because it's difficult, adults like yourselves would be hard for me to get a group of adults.
I don't change already, man.
No, I mean like adults, it would be hard to get many of them together to begin with because we have different schedules and whatnot. So we're trying to reach out to the kids who are exposed to their parents on a daily basis and could help curb some of their natural tendencies. And this is something that's possible. Have you ever noticed, and everyone jokes about it, that Belizeans would throw garbage in their country, but you go to Chetumal, right? Everyone knows a joke, and suddenly they forgot that they know how to litter, right?
But
so it's something that's
we fear enforcement, and in Mexico we fear any kind of enforcement: the seatbelt, the garbage, the misbehavior. And I know, to be very fair, the resources it would take to enforce, especially with littering, is one that has been a battle, and we've been hoping to work on the other side, where people would just feel the civic pride of not having a dirty area. But it hasn't been working.
Yeah, so you're right. Some fear enforcement, but some just, I believe some just do it for pride. No one wants to go and to a certain extent they're representing Belize and represent Belize in such a negative light. I don't feel like Belizeans on a whole want to be represented negatively, right? So some of them do it out of civic pride. It's just to convert that feeling from only outside the country to now have it inside the country. Right, and again, I think the best way we are trying to go about this is to work with the kids, to teach them that that one ideal bag, that one chips bag, you're throwing away now will turn into that Lychee container when you're 20, when you're 22, right? So it's time to get that mentality in them now, and then later on it evolves.
Has there ever been an effort to work with adults who work in particular areas, whether it be, well, I imagine tour guides have this training to talk about it, but bus drivers, boat captains, nothing infuriates me more than driving behind a bus and somebody throws something out of the window. You know, I want to call the highway police if I could. But is there any effort probably to work with middlemen who can help to, they can't enforce, but they can keep on pressuring people to, or have a proper receptacle where they are so that the garbage stays within the vehicle itself, whether it's a boat or a bus or whatever else?
That's a really funny question, because I've been on so many buses and boats where they have maybe a bucket or something so you can throw your garbage in as you enter the bus, but for some reason people still just throw their garbage through the window. But I think what will be best is to work with the business community, the Chinese, the businessman, the average businessman that sells something and then gives you a bag along with it. Maybe if we can cut down the use of plastic bags, maybe from the business community, then I think Belizean will eventually accept the fact that, you know, we need to move away from the plastic bags which will eventually become marine litter.
Yeah.
I think you have a wonderful view of Belizeans. But are we taking too soft an approach? We seem to be soft handling this. You know, let's talk to them nicely. Let's, you know, hope that and let's see if why are we not going to the hard hammer approach? Listen, is this important? What radically will it take to change from seeing my container and not caring, but being the ultimate disrespect and going right across? It's a little line, you know. It's not artificial, it's a real line up and that it's different. Why can't we take the hard line approach and say this is important and somehow put in mechanisms to enforce? Because the problem is enforcement. Why are we taking the soft approach to littering?
Short answer is that's the only approach available at this point in time. Honestly, if you want the hard approach, then you would have to secure the necessary finance to do the hard approach. And I could tell you right after, but if you go and you start to police people for throwing away the trash, but then there's so much other things occurring in the country that could use the money equally, then it would be an uphill battle, and I don't see us winning such a hard uphill battle. But why the soft approach? It's better than no approach, right? So it might be soft, but at least it's a move in the right direction. Far better than standing still.
Good answer.
It's always better. It's always better to have a phase out over a straight hand ban, because you have to get people used to the idea so that they can soften up and decide to change. Because for me, I used to use a lot of plastic bags, but after the numerous amount of education, when I go to the grocery store now, I have like a small green shopping bag. It's highlighter green, and I go with it to the store and I buy it. People watch me funny, but I'm trying to help save my country.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I think your answer was very honest, because we do have competing priorities in the country. And while it is a soft approach, I think sometimes we just need to connect the dots for people. We love our fish. And when we can't get fish, nothing infuriates us more, because we live along the coast.
Exactly.
But we don't recognize how some of the behaviors that we practice contribute to these problems. Now, being a part of the solution, as we were talking about earlier, the campaign, the cleanup campaign, is it something that you are working primarily with schools and organizations, or can others join in? Because maybe if they're out there collecting the plastic, or we're out there collecting the plastic, we'll see how bad the problem really is.
So yes, there's always room to join in. I mean, Belize is really big, we're really small. So there's always room for people to join in, and they could just contact us, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, add us on Instagram, you know, whatever necessary to get through to connect with us. And right now, yes, we're primarily targeting primary and secondary schools. Given the time of the year, it's difficult to work with tertiary. We're coming to the end of the school year. People are more focused on exams, graduating, and what have you. So we're working with primary and secondary schools primarily. And with the cleanup, again, it's I don't want to use the word cleanup because we're always used to cleanup. It's more of a sampling of the litter, because we again don't have information. We could sample and you could say, okay, last year we collected 20,000 pounds of trash. This year we collected 15,000 pounds of trash. Maybe next year we collect 10. We could always say, but it's just how much trash. No one knows how much trash from one beach or how much trash per meter square. So if you would say, how clean is Belizean beaches to maybe Jamaica, to Trinidad and Tobago? If Trinidad and Tobago maybe collects 5,000 trash and we collect 10,000, you'd say, okay, Belize is dirtier, but maybe we have more beach, we have more space. So that 10,000,
exactly,
maybe that 10,000 maybe less, but if you're just thinking in terms of gross number, you won't see it.
What would you consider a success after this marine litter campaign? In 2 weeks, you look back and you say, that was a success. What is your marker for success?
All right, so like you said, that was an internal question. How do we measure impact? Yeah. So we started to think, why not do something the students are used to? Before the presentation, before we tell them anything about marine litter, we do a group interview. What do you know about marine litter? What have you been exposed to? Then after our presentation, after them we teach them methodology, after we highlight the different threats it poses and whatnot, we do a group interview again. What have you learned? Right? So we could then sample initial impact. What have they taken away within this 45-minute presentation?
Yeah. So I was going to go back to your question about the trash. Like I said in the beginning, Oceana is always out. You could go out every month and you will meet a group of Oceana wave makers out collecting trash. So if anybody wants to join in, you can become a wave maker and help keep our country clean.
Yeah. All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you for coming in and sharing with us the work that has been ongoing for the past 20 years for the Coastal Zone Management Authority. And of course, we wish you the best of luck with your upcoming campaigns and the other projects as well. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're shifting gears to focus on Music Week. So stay tuned.